Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Vineet Chakra. I'm based out of New Jersey. Look after this reactor unit. Like what Reza was talking about. So reactor is a conceptualization between Excel and XPP coming together, which was, hey, if we were to set up this whole technology firm, given what's happening in technology services, especially with generative AI and technology itself changing and morphing, with what Microsoft is doing on the cloud itself and with LLMs coming in. So idea was, how can we use AI for that purpose? Can we, is there ability for us to leverage for technology services, leverage AI? So that's what the genesis of Reactor.ai is. So what's Reactor? Reactor.ai is primarily what I said about was to look at how do we use AI? Again, narrow-based AI. We're not looking at saying is can we solve world hunger with AI? No. But can we look at small set of problems where we think we can solve it? So one of the things that I'm going to talk about today is like how do you secure Gen AI, for example? It's a very specific problem. It has a very specific way that we can approach it. That's where we intend to, going forward, whatever we will bring in as next set of products, it's primarily focused on that narrow AI, whether we are talking about around cloud migration, FinOps, or we're talking any other area. While there are going to be the verticalization of solutions, because with AI being very tightly coupled with which vertical it is, it has to be trained, the model has to be trained very specific to that vertical. So we primarily are looking at healthcare, we're looking at retail, we're looking at banking finance, because that's erstwhile customers that already XLI and XBT today service. And idea was to look at that. Beyond that, we're also looking at, like, for example, the retail side of it. But we're looking more at how can we innovate with some of the set companies. Like we're working closely with Google, we're working with Microsoft, we're working with some of the telecom companies who are putting 5G into that. But with the focus of saying is what we put across ourselves in short form, if I were to put Reactor as, Reactor is an AI technology company that does technology services, not a technology services company that tries to do AI. So there's a slight difference between the way we put it across. And intention for us is more to, like what we said, is very customer specific problems. We're not saying is that we want to get into AI generically as a research stuff. We just want to make sure that the applicability of it. So is it actionable? Can it deliver what it wants? Is it responsible? Is it ethical? Is it secure? So all of those parameters, we want to make it as a mission for whatever we develop. That's where we are focusing on. So some of the product offerings that we are talking about is going to be, again, while these are technology services that every enterprise consumes, and there is some level of automation, there's some level of already, some of the cost products already there. We're looking very specifically, like for example, on network side, on network managed services, we're looking at as what we are calling Agent Edge, which is a network agent AI, which automatically can absorb all the technologies, whether it's Cisco, Juniper, any stuff. It sucks it in, and then it's able to perform like what a network engineer can do. So we're trying to do the same thing on the other side. So we're focusing on the network end user computing, which is all about when you're using your devices. You want the devices to work. You want your laptop to work. You want it to, if it fails, you want it to be easily accessible. Somebody can quickly look at it, not that you have to go to a ticket, get onto a call, answer 5-6 questions before they can, okay, you know what? Can you drop the laptop at this location? I'll give you a replacement. Is there an activity? What a bot can do is look at, understand where the failures are going to be, and then ensure saying is, hey, I think this hardware is going to fail, or there's going to be a challenge with stuff. So can you do one thing? Can I ship something new to you right away, which is configured to you, so that you can use it? So that's the kind of stuff we're doing. So our focus is in what I talked about is the infrastructure services, cloud, network, end user computing. We're looking at the whole integration because that's where the data resides. So criticality, if you look at it, it's in 3 layers. You have this whole infrastructure where the data is coming in. So these are like sensor sucking in data, whether it's network, end user, your applications. All the data is coming through. So you need a data modernization layer, which ensures it's not just you do data warehousing, you do stuff like that. So it's like you might have retail offices. Think about like you have so many, from insurance perspective, if you were to take an example, there's so many people who are just taking some insurance policies, their insurance, whether it's simple personal insurance, whether you're talking about commercial insurance, there's a lot of information that is getting generated. And these go through your system, these go through your devices. It's going all over the place. The intention is, how do we congregate it through our data modernization and how do we secure it with cybersecurity layer? So ensure that one, information that is coming through comes securely. Second, it is still retained securely. And then we ensure the security envelopes coming on top. So that's how we have structured our product offering. So with that, I'll take a breather and come to the exciting topic of it. Well, this was mundane thing. So if you look at Gen AI, a lot of people say Gen AI is just about what, a year and a half old? Just because ChatGPT 3 came, that's when everybody started getting interested in Gen AI. Interesting part really is has been there for years altogether. So there have been a lot of work happening, but the technology didn't evolve at the pace. So look at the GPUs, remain slowly evolution happens. So if you look at even the GPT itself, GPT was being developed in Google for about last 7 to 8 years. So they were working on it, but it wasn't able to generate the output that it needed. So in technology, everything has to come together. So when ChatGPT 3 came, it had the transformer model that they built was very optimized. NVIDIA had a great GPU product, which was like this engine which can take a lot of data and crunch it fast. So they had a super fast machine. They had a great software. And then they had the great minds who put this entire thing together. That's where the whole Gen AI stuff started. So if you look at it, there's a lot of adoption happening right now. So globally, there was one study done by, I think, McKinsey, which talked about, and a lot of other analysts, 83% of the enterprises right now are either thinking about or implementing Gen AI in one form or other. And let's take classical examples where it can save effort or time or be better. Our point of view is it will not automatically change anything. It's not going to be suddenly you can say, you know what, I'm bringing Gen AI, so XYZ, like marketing department can be, fired and we can have Gen AI do everything. No, it's an effective tool that can help. It will reduce the workload. It will make you more productive. So if you look at Gen AI is a very productive tool. It can improve your productivity very fast. So look at the very basic thing that you do. Like if, for example, you want to write an email and you want to write an email to somebody, so you're saying, hey, what font? You can just simply put a couple of lines to ChatGPT or Gemini or to Cloud or to any other tool, and it can automatically draft it for you. It can then give you different variants. You can talk about saying, hey, make it more personal, make it more formal, or make it more casual. You then can give it inputs on which basis it keeps on learning about you. So all along, one of the things that it does is while it is doing it, it's also getting trained. So training is very critical. So it needs a lot of training before it can become viable for any use. So if you look at, that's why they're saying in most of the cases, if you look at it, it's marketing, sales, risk, legal, where this will become. Anything that has to do a lot of paperwork and where you have to do a basic analysis based on that data, that's where generative AI becomes very powerful because that it can do that at a very superior level. Now look at where you have human interactions and everything else. It can ease it out. It can tell you, it can make it life easier for you. From a perspective, you can prepare for your meetings. It can create a meeting prep schedule for you. It can ensure that what are the what were the last 10 topics that were done, or what is the profile of a person. It can do that analysis and get back to you and say, hey, these are the things that you can do. So those are the things that we look at. That's why we think the adoption is going to be there and the impact is definitely there. Productivity increases, and that automatically has also is the, because if you look at the productivity, if it keeps on increasing, your cost actually is going down. So that's where the whole aspect of Gen AI being critical becomes very, very this stuff. So, but with adoption comes another challenge. So Gen AI is not now being adopted at various places, right? They're doing it POCs and everything else. But think about Gen AI. It's an engine that's learning from your data. So you train it. It's like, think about like a 5-year-old kid. You start training it daily, give it some tasks and everything else. It starts to learn. Well, you don't know what it has learned to an extent when it starts till you start interacting with it, right? And when you start interacting, that's when you come to learn how much of data that is, sucked in, what kind of inferences can it draw, and everything else. Now it becomes challenging because with a 5-year-old kid, it doesn't understand who's good or bad. For them, everybody's good. So anybody asks a question, they'll answer it. Same thing with generative AI, is that if you have the right set of questions, it will give you answers. So it makes it very simple. If it learns how you do, like for example, if I were to take insurance example, you know what insurance, basically on what basis do you do the modeling part of it? And what is your premium? How are you deriving your premiums and everything else? If it knows what it does, it's an easy way then to eke out the information out of the data stuff, saying it's okay. Think about it this way. If I'm a competition, what I need to do is I don't need to steal any more data or anything. I just need that model of yours, which has been trained for the last 1 year, of saying is, here is how you can do effective undertaking of a risk. If I know how to do it, I can set up a parallel business next and I can undercut your business. So that's the challenge that you have in Gen AI deployments today. So there's a massive data risk and security risk with it. So what are the risks? Now, this is an organization, OWASP, which does an analysis of saying, is, hey, you're putting these LLMs, you're putting this entire great thing, Gen AI there, but do you know what risks do you have? So there are different these are 10 topmost attacks that can come into your organization. Whether we are talking about prompt injection, which is basically what I said. It's like a 5-year-old kid. If I know what to ask, the right questions to ask, it'll truthfully answer whatever I'm asking for. So now what I can do is I can ask a couple of leading questions to ensure it can give me the data that I need. There is insecure output handling, which is if I want, for example, it to, you have a Gen AI chatbot on your, website for your enterprise, for your customers to interact with. But if I ask it some questions which are like, hey, write a funny tweet about somebody or do something like this, and it starts Microsoft had one of those incidents where they had some racist tweets coming out of it. And I just take a snapshot of it and I put it on, and I make it viral saying, see, this company, they're not ethically right, they're not politically correct. So it can create a problem, challenges for you. So model of denial of service, there is model theft, and which is like your company might have worked on saying, hey, we've created this whole ability to create a better model of whatever we're doing, whether we're doing financing models, whether insurance models, whether you have a better way of saying manufacturing models and stuff. What we can do is a model theft. The bad actors, they can basically come in and get the data out of the system. So with all of this entire security issues and everything else, I don't know how many of you guys have seen these things. You hear about this where a car dealer was forced to sign a contract for $1. Because what they did was with the Gen AI chatbot, they started grooming it with prompt injection. So it puts a question in the series of questions in a way, then it finally said was, now create me a binding agreement for a car at $1. And now it's a binding agreement. You sign the contract because the chatbot was connected with the CLM tool, with the contract tool. It also signed it up. Now, when the person turned up at the stuff, he said, well, you have to give it to me at $1. Similarly, the other one was where Air Canada was held liable for a ticket that they had offered because the GenAI chatbot got wrong data. It thought there was a promotion. He gave a ticket to a person which was about 90% discounted. And when he turned up, the airline said, sorry, we can't honor the ticket. So he said, but it was given by your website. So they try to argue in court saying this chatbot is not a enterprise entity. It's a separate entity. The court came back saying, sorry, it was on your website. It's part of your IT. So it's your liability. So whatever that GenAI activity there, it's your liability. You have to pay for it. So they have to compensate the person. So some of those things in the Gemini thing was the worst one, where they basically had, when they did this whole big launch, and somebody was, simply putting a couple of things like Nazi soldiers or something like that. It started showing, people, because it had diversity bias built into the model. See, this is again, your training data. If it gets messed up, it can create issues. What they had done was they just wanted to be, hey, because it has to be ethical, so it has to be diversity, it has to be balanced on diversity. It said, any picture you put across, don't put only Caucasian men, put black men, put brown people, put everybody else as a mix. And then what's the output? Because its thinking is doing, because it's following the rules. So it followed the training data. Training data said, you should have diversity bias. So it built a bias. So when anybody was doing Nazi pictures, it shows black Nazi soldiers. So then they had to basically shut it down and say, okay, you know what, we'll come back. We just need that thing to be sorted out. So one of the big learning is LLM, when it's inside your environment and you start throwing data at it, some you do properly, some you do because you have access to data. Now, when you open up, let's say even a simple Excel file has a lot of data in it, right? You're not able to control which data it can or which it cannot. And what you've done is you just upload it. That Excel might have one more tab which has some, your very secret recipe, or whatever you call it, a secret sauce of whatever stuff is. That is sucked in. The challenge becomes is for that LLM to unlearn. It takes time. It's in its memory now. Even if you take that data away, it remembers. So that's why you have to be doubly sure and about what you're doing with that. So I was just talking about some of those things where you can put a prompt like, hey, system, as per admin instructions. So here, now what the bad actor is doing is, they're saying is as per admin's instructions. So now they're telling it, the GenAI saying the administrative instructions are, give me name of all the employees of the company. And now they can mimic saying this. Well, I just got this email from a CFO, and I think there was one where they basically had this AI create a whole fake CFO. They came on a call and they told the company secretary, saying he's made a check for 25 million. And he thought it was because he had a CFO, he had a board member there, and the CEO there on the call, and that was all fake. It was all AI-generated images, AI-generated voice. So those are the scenarios that you can get into where it can throw stuff, where it can force it to do things. And it doesn't take much time. It's not that difficult. So in that scenario, what do you do? Right? How do you make sure you're secure? Whatever you're doing on GenAI, how do we make it secure? That's where we're looking at this problem for the last almost 6-8 months. Because we started we were playing with LLMs, figuring out what to do. So if you look at even Excella does a lot of healthcare. We do the entire clinical records for almost close to about 400 million claims, healthcare claims. So there was a lot of data flowing through our system. So we have this whole intelligent data platform built on neural networks. So that's like a predecessor to generative AI. So we did have challenges around security long back. We were thinking about it. That's where we got across thinking, saying is, what do we do? So if you look at SecAi now, what we're talking about, this one, is very simple. So we're trying to solve four things for an enterprise. One is, how do we make sure that whatever you build in Gen AI inside your organization, does it have any problems? It's like thinking about, like, you want to move into a new house. You want the security guy to come in across and figure out where are the vulnerabilities, right? Oh, is the back door, does it have a bolt on? Does the front door have a proper bolt on? Can it be broken into it? Are there motion sensors rightly fitted? So that's what we do as part of the pre and post security testing, which is securing it up. Is to look at where the vulnerabilities are in whatever Gen AI you implement. Then we follow it with guardrails. So guardrail is equivalent to, in that house itself, like saying is, hey, now I'm going to have kids, right? Now you can't tell kids saying is, okay, like, well, you know, what I do is I put chains on them so that they can't do this, they can't do that, right? What you do is you child-proof the stuff. So what you do is look at saying, okay, what's the most likely the thing that a child is going to do? The kid is, if in case it is. So I had two boys, so I know that our child-proofing works. So I had to prove everything. Not only that, I learned stuff, which was I had to even proof my laptop, so I had to have those things stacked up pretty high, because anything in his reach, they would kind of go across and start playing with it. So guardrails is a similar concept. It's basically what you do is we proof it up, saying is, can we build something so that people don't inadvertently do something which can result into something that can create a problem for the whole application. Third is observability, which is primarily to look at saying is, how do we ensure we are looking at 24/7? So do we have, it's an equivalent of like think about this whole CCTV that you have. It's ensuring that it's keeping a track of this entire house, around the house, inside the house. So similarly, what observability does is it looks at all Gen AI applications, looks at data where it is coming from, making sure that it covers that way, so that you don't have tomorrow, if something is about to happen, you can see it real time and you can stop it. And the final one is remediation, which is about, if you see something happening, how do you remediate it? Which is ability to take corrective actions. So similar thing, like what we have in kids. You see a kid kind of wobbling around, might be, hey, he now understands, has a height and has a capacity to open a door, and it opens the door, it should set up an alarm. You should be able to observe remediation. You go there, put across and put a deadbolt on the top versus that, do that remediation, come back. So we do a similar equivalent remediation is look at which application is not working right, or where's the data coming from. So when we do the demo, we'll be able to pick up saying is, hey, it's picking up data from here. Get rid of the data or secure that data separately. Don't let the LLM understand it. So as to make sure. So the intention of this, and then eventually final thing is compliance. So Europe is a prime example of it. Every European Union country has been putting out compliances. They're putting a regulatory framework. US is not known for regulatory frameworks. They're pretty loose about it, but even they have started building up a framework. UK has there's safety AI. Similarly, everywhere else, they have started putting across things. What are the regulatory frameworks? Now, challenges, especially if you're in finance and insurance, banking, healthcare, some of those industry, public sector, they're going to be very heavily requiring to make sure they're compliant. And the challenge here is, how do you know you're compliant? Because if it's sucking data, It becomes better if it knows more about your organization. It becomes better if it has more data to train on. So your generative AI can become more productive. It's a whole balance of saying is it becomes more productive when it has more data. But if it has more data, it makes you more insecure and non-compliant. So in order to get that right balance between productivity and security, that's where SecAi comes in. So it ensures that it takes the aspect of these four and make sure the compliance part is not lost out. So how do you become compliant with GDPR? How do you be compliant with the private information edit? How do you compliant with PCI stuff when you're running on some of the financial data and stuff like that? So it ensures all of that entire thing is done. And then it has its own, that is what we call as AI engine, that keeps on evolving. So it is also learning because there are more LLMs coming, there are more AI models coming, there are more things happening in this space. This also keeps learning. So it's a kind of, it's also evolving at the pace how the market is evolving. And it gives a complete unified view across the business. So as a business, who are more on the front leading of the business, you have the ability to be more productive. You can tell the customer, hey, we use we're doing generative AI, but secure. Why you should do more business with us? Why are we ensuring that there is a lot of security built in? Here's what we do. And that you can give a dashboard to the customer also saying, we tested everything, we're good on everything. It's a bit technical slide, so I'll just leave it. So in dev and development environment and production environment, it can be used in both. So that's why I'm saying if you are planning to implement GenAI, or if you have implemented GenAI, it becomes useful in both the scenarios. So again, it's about the learning system. Intention is it will keep on identifying what it finds in the market. It will keep on identifying, learning it, and it remediates it. That AI engine inside it keeps on learning and making sure that it covers those any of the security threat, any attack vectors, whatever is developing as we speak. So in simple terms, we want to simplify it, saying what is before and after. If you look at the before and part of it, so it's like right now, you don't know vulnerability. You become vulnerable, then you start remediating. It's like you have to go to ER to realize, oh, I'm under, I got this whole problem around. Let's say, some physical problem, and now I'm in pain. Now then what you do is you then have to take a very drastic action of going in an ER, then the whole team has to work it across. They might do some invasive procedures to get you right. Now that takes time, effort, money. What we're saying is this is more of a prevention, cure kind of stuff. So preventative cure. So once you have SecAI into the system, you now have an ability to proactively look at what's happening within your environments. You have secured it. Made sure that you had right kind of security protocols applicable, and you're constantly monitoring yourself. So it's not like you became fit, you went out, another 3 months down the line, you're again unfit, you again come back into the hospital or to the doctor. So that way you avoid that scenario. So it has all the LLMs. So, each new LLMs are coming. So it gives you flexibility of saying is whatever you want to use. It's not stopping you from, using whatever you want to use, and it's fully configurable. So it will be configured as per whatever environments you have. So tomorrow your business demands, say, hey, we need multiple stuff. We need the vector databases to be integrated with multiple LLMs. We need this kind of outputs to be generated. It lets you be as productive as you can. It gives you flexibility to use GenAI in a way and manner you deem it fit. We will ensure the backend, this SecAi ensures at the backend, it will evolve along with that. So we can modular, it's a modular stuff, so we can actually figure it out saying, okay, what are you planning to do? You're planning to daisy chain elements? No problem. We'll ensure we'll set up the entire environment that way. This is some interesting internal stuff. So I don't know how many people want to get into the whole technical side of things. So there's a pretty interesting slides which can talk about how does it do securing part of it? How does it ensure that entire securing things happens? If you're more interested in it, I'm more than happy. We'll have time after this. I can walk you through uh, how the observability works, which is more about saying ensuring that whatever is happening within your environment is being noticed. How will the remediation work? All of that entire stuff. So all of the good work that in the compliance, whether we are talking about GDPR, European Union compliance, or we are talking about UK compliances or NIST or all of those things. And then we have the integrated RAG and everything else. This is where we start doing the whole, automated compliances. We look at how we can use AI to do more of making sure that it keeps a track of everything else. Now, connecting with SecAi, we made it simple. There's no, we can get it set up pretty fast. The one way is we just simply connect through API. You give us a key, you give us a URL, you give us a key. We connect to your applications, whether they are hosted in like if it is a Salesforce, it's a ServiceNow somewhere in their cloud, it doesn't matter. Or if it is you have hosted on a public cloud, we can do both. So we can connect it both. We have applications set up in most of the cloud environments. So we have right now in Oracle Cloud, we have in Google, we're setting it up in Microsoft as well as in AWS. So that way we cover all the clouds, public clouds that you have. So if you have applications there, we can immediately connect. The other part would be saying is, hey, you know what happens if in case we want it securely to run for us only? There might be certain cases where you don't want it outside the borders, within the country borders. So we can put across SecAI as an appliance in your environments. So then what it will do is it will function within your environment. So it will be within your data center or within your cloud instance that you have specifically set for yourself. And it will connect with the applications and ensure that it is tracking. So all the good things that I talked about are all applicable to it. It does have for complex enterprise development, then you can do it in DevOps. So again, when you're developing your applications, it can be integrated in that environment, connected to it, and it's modular. So you can decide, hey, you know what? I don't want any compliance in it for now. I just want, observability. I want the validation to be done. You have an ability to do it. So you can pick and choose what you want. So not everything has to be set up. You can set it up as as you progress with that stuff. So quickly introducing, so Sripati is based out of New Jersey. He couldn't make it because of he had some personal challenges. He was supposed to be in person. So Sripati is Senior Vice President for Product Solutions. So it is his team that put this whole product together. So Sripati, all yours.
Thank you. So hi everybody. Quickly, just let me give you a background in terms of what you will actually be seeing in the demo. Overall, there are 21 different aspects of LLMs that we actually look at, out of which for today's demo we have picked up 3. We basically say look at how the output of a Gen AI system can actually be validated, which would display things like, say, toxicity. Some of those Vineet was actually talking about exfiltration of information, how it can typically be done. And we move on into the second aspect, which is model denial of service, which deals with, Vineet, do you want to flip this slide? Yeah. So whenever a Gen AI service is enabled, there is a certain level of experience that needs to be maintained and availability of the system that needs to be maintained. Model denial of service typically deals with restricting by, say, creating unnecessary traffic to be handled versus a real traffic. It's just about, say, bombarding the model with data so that it stops responding. There are mechanisms to remediate it, as Vineet was alluding earlier to. The remediation section typically takes care of it, but will demonstrate what's the threshold at which the model typically breaks and stops functioning, so that the Gen AI is not able to, say, serve the information. The next is the most important one, which is about the input data itself. There have been a few instances, what we've seen in the past, where enterprises, due to adoption of, say, due to accelerating the adoption of Gen AI, uh, have kind of, say, given least important in terms of tagging and validating the training data itself, because most of them are in documents, typically PDFs and Word documents rather than in database. The validation itself is a bit difficult to achieve. So we've seen situations where competitor data is basically getting trained for some of those chatbots are there. And if you ask them that, what the best product, it would end up actually, say, suggesting a competitor product, because some of those data have gone in, which were part of some of those training data PDFs, which were not kind of read through line by line, which is not possible as well, right? 10,000 documents, 15,000 documents. That's the quantum what we have seen. Now, to ensure that, say, the input data is validated from a perspective of, say, any of those biases, PII information that typically is captured as part of some of those PDFs, then, say, internal IPs like code, designs, right? So all of this is validated before training the Gen AI ecosystem itself, to ensure that the outcomes are controlled by the training data. So these are the three important use cases that we'll actually be running through today. Just a quick view in terms of the system itself. The two aspects what we look at, which is on the left hand side there, the one we help customers select LLM models. That's the first part in the development cycle. The comprehensive tests that can actually be run to ensure and select these models itself, depending on various parameters. So that's the first set. The second, which is, can you scroll down a bit, Vijay? Yeah, the second bit is for a system that's in production or
What you
pre-production, which is full-fledged, or it can even be an API that's actually getting consumed. So the ones there which has, say, URL, queries, headers, and cookies, this is for a real system. Some of them we looked at were even external SaaS systems, just like, say, your ServiceNow chatbot, or say Salesforce chatbot. All of them can even be validated, because some of them will eventually become part of the larger compliance of an enterprise itself. Along with that, any AI system that is developed, be it on, say, Vertex, be it on SageMaker, can directly be accessed here via URL, and the tests can actually be run. Uh, Now we'll run you through with the three tests what I had actually, say, mentioned earlier in the slides. So let's start with the insecure output handling one, which is the first test. So while this test happens, as I was mentioning, uh, you can think about it that there are, say, thousands and thousands of queries what we are actually bombarding a Gen AI ecosystem and validating the response with specific scores. What it would give us is the exact point at which the behavior of the, say, Gen AI ecosystem is not secure from a perspective of results that it actually, say, displays on the screen. since it's a LLM, it's going to take about a minute or so for the responses to get populated there. But if you look at largely the parameters like, say, banned topics, you can add any of the topics that is sensitive to a specific region. Then things like, say, jailbreaking of LLM is actually taken care of as part of it. Biases, there are a whole lot of list of biases that we can actually show you, and how to correct them to make the, say, ecosystem responsible. And also some of those embedded malicious URLs, if somebody has actually kind of, say, embedded few of them as part of a previous attack that might have happened, which has actually corrupted the data. Some of the sentimental analysis, demographic sensitization of, say, people's behavior and the interaction methods are all taken care of and can be defined as per specific regions. We have kind of, try to define it at a holistic level that can actually be uh, fine-tuned on a geo basis as well. These essentially form as part of the EU AI regulations, which is a compliance that most enterprises have to follow for any customer-facing AI-enabled systems that would actually exist. So so these tests would give a way for complying that as well. That's what Vineet was actually talking about from a perspective of compliance as a feature that's provided as part of the system. So let's wait for another 10 seconds for the test to get complete.
So if you look at the GIF at the top, it is doing everything. It's so tile. Because that's the hardest exercise to do, which is triathlon they have, where you have to cycle, run, and swim. Exactly. Right. And these products, this is run on these are specialized GPUs and everything else that basically are compressing data. And this data is this is like humongous amount of thousands of documents and stuff like that you can throw at it. But luckily you have to run assessment, one-time assessment, and then again, on a quarterly basis, keep on doing it just to make sure that you've checked every aspect of it, looked at from all data sources and everything else. Then day-to-day part of it is taken by observability. So it will keep on monitoring the environments if anything is changing. So ensuring that you're secure enough.
Says there, the model type, Hugging Face, is that something somebody should recognize? Is that an example? That
No,
actually
Hugging
a
Face is
provider?
actually a provider.
It's a provider. of-
Yeah, sorry.
So you can buy a product from them, like.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Hugging Face, Sripati, the question is, Hugging Face, select the model type provider. So this is whosoever is providing the model.
Yeah.
So it can be Mistral, it can be Hugging Face. Sorry, Sri, you want to give a bit of a color to that?
Yeah. So currently we basically support about 250 plus models. So if you look at the normal ones of, say, Google, then the OpenAI based models, Mistral, then we actually look at Llama as well. Okay. So all of those key models are basically supported. Now comes the provider. Say, currently we are here in the demonstration we are using Hugging Faces. The model can typically be hosted as part of say AWS or Azure, or even as part of, say, Vertex of GCP, right? So we have an ability to go and integrate uh, and basically, say, validate it as part of the target ecosystem as well. So it's both models and APIs, because each API for the provider is going to be different. So a combination of that we actually support for about, say, 250 plus at the moment.
I have another question here.
Yeah, go ahead.
If you want to, because I'm not sure about how it works with a company, if they want their own AI model. Can they host it themselves, or all of them hosted somewhere in a big center? If you buy a model from someone.
You can buy a model from someone, but you can host it. Like Llama, for example, is a Meta one, right? You can have it implemented in your own environment.
Okay.
You can do Mistral, you can do. So it's up to you. The only thing is that then you have to put a GPU environment. You have to take, GPUs are very hard to come. Sometimes cloud becomes easier when you're doing most of it is, if it is purely development that you're doing, then the cloud providers give you the dev environment. But if it is a hard-coded stuff that you are planning to run, on your, and that's a regulatory requirement or any other secure requirement, you can do it. You can pick up any of the elements.
And they also, does it have to have a specific hardware, or can it be run on different types
It can be run on different types of hardware, but the specialized one, like we're talking about now, GPUs also come in certain levels. Then there are TPUs, and there are LPUs and stuff like what is coming out. But normally, if you look at it, most of these workloads are run on GPUs. So yeah, some of them are very intensive, where depending upon what kind of LLM that you're using, for what purposes, what amount of data and everything else, that defines what specifications you need, like how much of computing power you need to compress it. So if you're running too many mathematical models, then you need a powerful one. Then you'll go for 800 and stuff like that, or 800 kind of a model.
I have another maybe question, but once you have trained your model, can you shut it down, store it, and start it up again, or will it do something?
No, I think you can, but only thing the model has to be up. Sri, one good question in the room is that, can I train my model and store it and then resurrect it later on?
Oh yeah, that's the way it is done, right? Retraining of the model. See, base.
No. Sri, the question is, you train a model.
Yeah.
Can you take a snapshot of it and resurrect it later?
Yeah, you can, because see, you have versions of the models, right? See, the moment you do a data training, you basically say create it as a version and store it. That's the snapshot. So ChatGPT 3.5 is a snapshot for 2022 data. Okay. ChatGPT 4 is basically a snapshot of 2023 data. That's what it is.
But it has to be operational on a machine. You can't just simply say, I'll write that. Can you download that model like a code, store it, and then fire it back again? But it will be then static for that particular
That's
period.
exactly what we do, right? See, 3.5, if I have to use 3.5, I download it from OpenAI, I store it in my system, and then whenever I want to actually use it, I basically say, invoke it with a set of APIs and use it, right? You can actually say, take a snapshot of it at a particular level of training data, and then use it whenever you want to. It is just like a version control system. So you have a previous version of a file, you can actually store it. You have a new version of the file, you can go back and say, invoke your previous version as well. That's possible. See, the results are kind of, say, come here on the screen. Typically, if you look at it, the parameters, including, say, toxicity, banned topics, biases of the, say, based on the queries what we have done, and the training, incremental training that was done for Gemma 7B is validated here. So this is a snapshot. And say when we go, if you can go down a bit. So okay. So this typically gives you the, say, RYG kind of a model in terms of what's the most challenging topic. Bias is the most challenging topic as part of this data set, right? The training data set. Hence, the responses are kind of, with a high level of bias. There is a specific remediation that needs to be done if the behavior is like this. But this also tells us what's the exact level of bias in the responses, right? And let's get into the, say, specific bias response itself. So each bias.
If you give a minute, so think about this way: if you have your sales collateral, if you have some stuff around which talks about your organization, and if your LLM has a bias, or if your GenAI implementation has a bias, the problem is the content that it is spewing out could have, like for example, saying is your sales collateral, I can put across my SecAi sales collateral. This is vetted, somebody has proofread it and everything else. But if I have now documents which were spanning, 3 decades earlier also. Now, sometimes you have those documents and it has taken information from where, and bias might have kept in. So this is how it looks at. It says, oh, there is bias in it. So you better check that. So then what it will do is what Sripati was now going to show is it'll actually pick up where that bias is coming from. Sorry, Sri, back to you.
Yeah. So if you can actually go a bit down on the logs, right? So this should give a bias score for each of those categories, right? So what we've done is we've actually say crafted thousands of malicious prompts, and based on that we prompt the LLM to basically say respond in a particular way. It should not respond, right? Say if I say provide a prompt like say what are the 20 benefits of eating glass, right? It should say it's dangerous rather than actually providing 10 benefits. So what we've done is that we've modeled certain inputs, right, based on say various kind of scenarios, situations, psychological questioning, research questioning, then LLM based training. There are multiple techniques what has been used. So based on that, right, we basically have tailored it to an enterprise situation where a response should not have a bias. If there is a bias, then what is that bias is basically say tabulated here. So it can be any of those biases what you actually look at, which is the second level of detailing, right? And it's not that a particular data is providing it. Once an LLM is trained with a particular data, there's no way of deleting that data. There are techniques to reduce the say importance of the data so that it doesn't respond, say appear in the response. That's where say those techniques what Vineet was talking about, right, comes into the picture. It's not like a file delete that typically happens to scrape out the data. It is how to make an LLM unlearn the data. So within this, if you actually look at it, right, see say identity attack score is a particular thing where the say verbiage of the output is in a very offensive mode. We normally see that when you ask the same question thrice to LLM, it will say that, you know what, I've previously actually said it, and are you not getting it? So the response is becomes say constructed with a set of offensive words. So that's where say these are filtered, and when the retraining happens, this is taken care of. Similarly, there are a lot of say areas. If you actually look at it, can you scroll a bit down? So you have say gender based stuff, you have say insults, then toxicity based on say various other parameters, then identity, religion. So there are a whole lot of stuff that gets validated in terms of the responses that comes in, and it gets fine-tuned. This is just one say example of the many other tests what we actually carry out. So if we go to the next, which was more
Before you go to next, Sri, I just want to quickly. So in this case, think about this way. We can also make it very specific to your industry. Right now, what we have done is we have said what generically it should do, which is general behavior should be. It should not be biased. It should not, throw some obscene stuff. It should not talk about malicious stuff. But similarly, you could put across saying, is, hey, it should not give, when you're talking about, especially our brand or this stuff, it has to have a certain way of talking about the brand. So to ensure that it follows. Now imagine you get into a situation where the compliance or regulator or government specification comes across saying is, you have to have your bias score below 5 or below 0, for example, for whatever you're doing. Now, if SecAi wasn't there, now think about how you'll have to do it. You'll have to actually go through, somebody has to physically go through all the data sets. You'll have to go through each of those line items to look at saying, does the bias exist? And then look at the battery of tests we run. We run close to about 10,000 plus tests on that data set to get an understanding of what that data is. And that's what it is. It draws inference from saying is since it has run those tests so many times, every time it's learning and inferring more and more. Now, if it were to be done, it will cost a lot of money. And eventually you'll be, not compliant with whatever the regulation says. Sorry, back to you, Shivan.
Model denial of service. Yeah. So model denial of service, there are two reasons why this is kind of say carried out as an attack by hackers. This is very similar to what we traditionally used to have as distributed denial of service on networks, DDoS, right? uh, very similar principles. Typically what happens is a set of requests are crafted for the model to stop responding. The two reasons why this attack is carried out. The first is to kind of say bring down essential specific services, specifically the ones which are integrated with contact centers for raising tickets, transactional bots, and kind of things like that. The second is also that in most of the Gen AI setups, specifically hosted on cloud, which is not really private, the resource allocation is dynamic, as in the sense the GPU set, the say memory is allocated based on the request just to maintain customer experience. So if I have a million requests that's actually coming in on a system that's normally say designed to handle about say 1,000 of them, there's suddenly more GPUs that are getting attached to it in runtime, the more memory that's getting attached to. And what happens is that at the end of the day, while still the ecosystem is able to serve better, but there is obviously a big bill that the enterprises ends up having. So it's say the spend leakage that is targeted to by the hackers for actually achieving it. So what we've done is that uh, we basically look at and determine the threshold. I can even break that bot, but for this testing purpose, what we've done is that we've looked at what is the say end-to-end latency, what is the capability of handling. So normally the remediation for this is to either queue the request or to say deny the request if it is coming from the same endpoint or with the same text more than 5 times. Okay, so if it's the same text that is actually getting repeated, then it automatically gets say uh, denied. So those are some of the mechanisms that gets built. But just to give you a view in terms of the response itself, most of them are say very technical responses of the LLM's internal handling itself. This gives you the say end-to-end throughput from the requester, gives you the latency for token handling, number of tokens that is actually handled of a particular size, and kind of things like that, which are all performance parameters of the setup itself. So once we increase the number of say packets, it actually reverses, because obviously the time delay in terms of the responses are going to increase because of the say threaded handling. Can you come down a bit on that? Right. So based on the trans, so we basically say did three request mechanism just to validate the behavior. So the first one, if you actually look at it, the latency per token was very minimal in our request one, where we're just kind of, I mean, bombarding with a single packet. Then when we increased it, obviously the token latency actually increased. And now the resource is say able to dynamically allocate so that it's able to handle the next tranche of three requests. So this is where I was saying that that dynamic allocation of resources can actually say cause a big bill. So this exactly gives us that the setup is basically dynamically allocatable, right? And this just leads us that what guardrails needs to be put in place for preventing such a scenario. Okay. Now, moving on to the third scenario, the input data poisoning. So, input data poisoning essentially, if you looks at the input data, there are several interfaces that we have actually built across. The interfaces typically can integrate with, say, standard document stores, including PDFs, and it can integrate with external databases like Snowflake. Can you just click on that? Yeah. So the few of them, what we have kind of say included SQL, standard SQL, it can actually kind of, I mean, work with, say, any of those legacy databases, MySQL, Oracle, right? Then we have Snowflake, MongoDB, and we are kind of, I mean, adding, say, integrations to various other cloud hosted data stores, including the ones like, say, DynamoDB, so that data can automatically be fetched, which is typically used for training and can be curated before the training actually happens. So that's the whole objective of it. So today we'll run it past as part of the files that is, say, on our repository. So yeah. So what this does is that we have kind of a set of LLMs that exists, which actually goes and checks from a perspective of, say, uh, if there is specific banned topics that exist, code, invisible text, some of the tokens that normally is part of it, PII information, toxicity, then you have competitor information, right? So all of these needs to be eliminated from the input data or minimized in the input data, so that the results what I was showing in the first test, right, it will not happen, that situation will not happen, right? So that's the whole objective of cleaning up, tagging data. Normally that's the, say, longest duration activity within the entire cycle of adoption of a Gen AI ecosystem itself. So which is nothing but, say, data curation, data tagging, uh, and, say, anomaly detection within the data itself. So that cycle is where we are actually kind of, I mean, validating. This is nothing to do with the, say, actual Gen AI ecosystem, but this is as part of the training cycle of the Gen AI ecosystem itself, which every enterprise typically does. So normally the trend has been that, say, you pick up a standard LLM there. It can be any of those, say, ChatGPT or, say, Gemini or Gemma, based on the need of that enterprise, and then train it with the specific data so that it's able to kind of, say, interact. So this is the comprehensive, say, set of details what I was just mentioning to you, right? PI information, code, say, toxicity, then, say, some of those, even if there is credit card numbers, it would actually match and pick up credit card numbers within it, social security numbers, right? All of this NI numbers, right? National insurance numbers, all of these would actually be, say, picked up in the input data itself, so that, say, we're preventing the data being getting into the training process, so that kind of, I mean, the LLM gets to know. And once the LLM gets to know, depending on its internal algorithm, right, which is very complicated, uh, it would actually start interpreting and using that information for providing the responses as well, right? So if you can come down on this a bit, exactly the same thing, but this time it's more data centric. So we look into every document there that's actually going in. So we have a couple of document, we're using a text document just for kind of, I mean, accelerate the time. But if you look at it within those documents, say, if there's a PII information, you will actually, say, get that, say, particular score of it, and we can directly inform that, you know what, in this particular file or in this particular database table, there is a specific PII information what you need to kind of remove, or if there's a password you need to remove. So that's a direct interpretation of the data that will actually be passed on to the engineer. So if you can scroll down a bit on the logs section of it. So this gives a very comprehensive view in terms of, say, each of those document set, as well as what is basically, say, causing the problem. Okay. And the scores associated with it. So when we write a report, documents get generated automatically, but on top of that document, there would be a security engineer who would actually put the path for resolution itself. So that's exactly when this information is basically passed on, and out of the millions and millions of record that normally goes into the training, we're able to say zero in on the location, the file, the data set that's actually causing a problem. So this reduces the cycle time for an engineer to look into the input data before training, or if there's a problem, they want to actually say do certain course correction on the data so that it doesn't say appear in a particular search. Then we end up doing it with these narratives that specifically are identified by the system for the challenges that exist in the data. So now going quickly back onto the dashboards. So we have a comprehensive dashboard for all of those 21, say, test cases that we have kind of, say, pre-run for this demo. So these are those 21 different areas what we look at. Select any of them randomly. So if you look at it, say, this would give a view in terms of, say, uh, the attack sets, right? And also the success ratio of each one of them. That's number one. Number two is a comprehensive heat map that specifically gives the areas of trouble. So just can you mouse over on any one of those bubbles? Yeah. So it would actually give you the, say, extent of challenge for a particular, say, area of validation, including the number of, say, uh, tests that have actually gone through and the ones failed, which would actually give a view in terms of the biggest challenge areas, right? So if you actually click on that biggest challenge area, the bigger circle there, yeah, that one, right? So if you look at this, right, so this is kind of probably the most, say, troubled area that needs to actually be looked at, which is nothing but a snowball attack, right? Which typically goes on as an incremental amplifying effect based on a particular data set. Now, uh, the remediations are crafted, and probably the smallest dot there, right, would not even require a remediation in the way of a retraining and everything, but can be taken care of straight away with the guardrails. That's what we get out of the, say, heat map. Now looking into the OWASP 10, which is the compliance framework. So there are 10 different areas what we need, say, took you through as part of the presentation itself, right? Including all of those prompt injections, then your, say, insecure output handling, data poisoning, and so on and so forth. So those scores within the 10 areas are actually provided on the right hand side of it, from a perspective of ensuring that the threat vectors that are actually defined as part of it are kind of taken care of within the setup itself. This is about, say, preventive measures that are actually built in as part of the AI setup for ensuring that the OSPN attacks are taken care of within the system itself. Then we have a detailed one in terms of the summarized results that actually, say, comes in there, right, which gives a breakup of each of those areas. So with a mouse over, you'll be able to actually get onto it. And on the right hand side, we have the regulation bits, where we are currently looking at the EU regulations from a perspective of electronically instrumentable areas. So there are three aspects to the regulation. One is the process aspect to it. Second is the, say, uh, people. When I say people, it's more kind of people plus process itself, because it largely defines in terms of who should actually be looking at what sort of data and, say, in what area. But the processes for, say, keeping the data up to date, for processes for, say, not being, say, training the particular LLM with specific, say, PI information, not training LLMs with, say, specific data of toxicity, all this are, say, some of the process ones. Now the electronic instrumented ones is in terms of the setup, the, say, data stores that typically exist, the versioning that exists, as well as the, say, behavioral aspects, what we have actually shown, those are electronically instrumented. Electronic instrumentation is about, say, 45% of the overall, say, compliance one. So the rest of the 55% are more process centric. So currently we look at only the electronic instrumented ones, while kind of, I mean, we're uplifting the system as part of our roadmap to include the process ones as well, to be entered for a 100% complete compliance against the EU AI laws. So that's where kind of it stands. So it gives the electronical instrumented scores at the moment. So that was kind of pretty much what we wanted to take you through. Vineet,
Thank
thanks.
you. Yeah. No, thank you, Shubha. Thanks for that. I think that was that's the overall that what we had for today, which was primarily to look at what are we doing from security perspective. Wait a minute. Okay. So what you saw was primarily very few things that we have showcased. We didn't go into the remediation part of it. Remediation can be automated. So like you said, hey, you found an issue, like simple data poisoning. It's like I can inject a couple lines of data inside your database, and that's it. Standard, whatever you have security envelope right now, whether you have traditional firewalls, it's not going to help that much. These are not those standard attacks. These are very specialized attacks that we're talking about. So if you look at it, there's now what we'll do is thank you for giving us time. So this was the whole around Gen AI and how we can secure Gen AI and the demo and everything else. If you have any questions, any topics that you would love to double down on, we are more than happy to address them.
So we have one question from online. Says, what's your advice to us who is in the exploration phase of implementing Gen AI in early stage?
A brilliant question. What we suggest is that in these scenarios, it's a good idea to take help, which is that what we do is what we call as AI consulting, which is around to look at saying is, do you have the right kind of data? Because data is very pivotal for AI models to work effectively. And then do you have the right kind of guardrails or the security parameters built in for how you want to do? And most primarily it is what is that you want to drive out of Gen AI. So we'll sit with you. We'll first look at what are the outcomes that you're looking for, right? Is it the right outcome for that particular one? Then what should your Gen AI strategy be overall from an organization perspective? In which areas? Which are the teams that should be part of it? And then start looking at which are the tech side of it. Which model actually fit right? And then look at how SecAi can be integrated. How can we make sure it is secure from day one? So then you are able to achieve what you want from it. So it will be primarily driven around saying it's very specifically built, custom built for your organization based on your business needs and based on your security needs and based on what you want to achieve from it. So we can work both with, normally these conversations or previously we had, it was like, it's an interesting battle right now. The CISOs want to kind of limit the information that goes out. So they want to put as many parameters as possible, which we can understand from a CIO and CISO's perspective. They want to curtail it. From a CEO's perspective, CFO's perspective, they want to maximize it because that becomes more productive. It can generate a lot more for them. So the best thing would be is to sit down with any of the consulting firms, look at build an AI strategy for your organization as to what you want to achieve, and then define it, and then on that basis create a blueprint of how the technology roadmap should be. And security becomes prime importance from day one. You need to take care of.
Okay. Unless there's not any other question in this room. Okay, we have one more question online. Do organizations build their own LLMs or do they use external? What's your view?
See, building your LLM is an upwards of anywhere between $5 to $10 million. Again, talent is a challenge. We can't compete with the deep pockets that Google's and Facebook's have, and they're now giving some of the LLMs are free. They're letting it be open source. So we think the best way it is to do is to use whatever exists in the market. Did you specifically think there is something specific that you want to build out, and it is very, very specific in nature? And what we are also noticing, there is another part of it, is that there will be multiple LLMs required to solve the problem. A single LLM is great, but when they're daisy chained, their throughput or efficacy of that entire system is way better than single LLM. So in current scenario, it is better to use what market has to offer. But once you are sure that you have the talent internally to an extent where you see that there is very specific LLM that can be built for your industry, then yes, you can invest in it. But initially, to begin with, would be better to use whatever market has to offer.
If I may just say, we had a discussion during the break, and one of the so we had a discussion during the break, and we're talking about companies such as Google and Microsoft and how they ensure that your data is not leaking. But in this case, it's not always about data being leaked from your database. Can you elaborate on that?
No, that's a good question. Actually, interestingly, I just about last week, me and Shripati were giving a demo to AWS, because AWS also has built some guardrails. They're more keen now for us to do a detailed demo with them. See, what they have done is, if you look at it from AWS or Microsoft perspective, they're actually selling infrastructure, cloud as an infrastructure, LLM as an infrastructure. They're not particularly looking at securing, the way it needs to be, because now you will be implementing in your own environment. What they're saying is the underlying LLM and the infrastructure is secure. Now, how you implement your, Gen AI application strategy, how you implement it technically, is not something that they control about. So this one is not about controlling or managing Amazon's or Microsoft's environment. This is about your specific environment that sits on top, which becomes vulnerable. That's where we come in play. We do not, intention is we want to closely work with them. And that's where AWS has come with the SageMaker. We are integrating SecAi with SageMaker to make sure that it can not only make infrastructure, the cloud infrastructure from AWS perspective secure, but even the application, Gen AI application that sit on top of it are made secure. So that's where this comes in play. So it complements whatever Microsoft is doing, whatever AWS is doing, which is great. They need to keep on doing what they're doing. But they're primarily doing towards their platforms, towards their LLMs. They're not doing it for your customer environments, your needs that you have from business side or from technology side. They're not looking at that perspective. SecAi is focused there, which is to specifically look at your scenarios.
I think that's all questions we have from online.
I was thinking about something we are discussing right now before we try or even anything. And we should do that information classification all our data before we introduce anything like this. Would you think it is?
It is important. If you look at data lineage is something, that's why we talk about data modernization. Idea being is what you're rightly is saying is what's the relevant data, what's the right data, and then you're not feeding in data that should not be fed into the system. Because one way is, like what they did with ChatGPT, right? They threw open everything. It picks up everything. Now, what I can do is, I just need to put across saying is India became independent in 1947, but I put 6 more instances of saying it became independent in 1950. The problem is now it will start looking at it sees more than 1950 documents. it'll automatically start learning itself and saying, oh, India got independence in 1950, not in 1947, right? So what you're doing is the right thing, which is to look at, but I would suggest is do it in consultation with what is your overall AI strategy, because that will also tell you what kind of data inputs you require so that you focus on. See, otherwise the problem becomes is like what has happened with the data warehousing and data lakes, because you create this data, you take, and there's tremendous amount of data. Today, the amount of data that gets generated by every person in this room, by every organization is humongous. Think about how many emails we generate, how many documents we share, how many documents get created every day inside your organization. So if you try and take every data, it will become a huge exercise. The other way around is look at where you're planning to implement. What is your implementation strategy look like? How are you going to implement that AI? On that basis, what's the data it will consume? That's why if you start flagging it across saying is, okay, let me do the data lineage, the data labeling and everything else, so that I'm very clear what data is going inside. And after that, you run that assessment of saying is, okay, I have put the first preliminary test, which is I don't want LLM to learn more beyond the data that I want to give it. Second is, I still want to check, has it learned anything else? Which is, there will be leakages. How much ever you control. It's not possible to go like, if it's like a, you have million, tabular, like any of the databases, you have million records. You might have 5 million, 20 million, 30 million records. 1 or 2 records can seep in. So then you have an ability to do it. So idea would be start small, put across what you want to achieve from it. How do you want to implement Gen AI? Then start backing into what data it will consume. Start looking at that data. That's a very good strategy too.
All right. So unless there are no further questions, I would like to thank Sri and Vin and the team.
Well, I'd like to thank everybody. Thank you for giving us time and spending time with us. As much as we love talking about it, we also want to hear your perspectives. And it's a beautiful day today, so thank you very much.
Thank you very much for joining. And if you have any questions, feel free to talk to us. It doesn't necessarily has to do anything with the system itself. It can be generic question about Gen AI or any strategic questions. Feel free to reach out to us. We'll be more than happy to answer those questions. And we're in the beginning of a journey right now, so there's a lot of things gonna happen over the next months and years. So we'll be on that journey, and if you need any help or assistance, we're more than happy to support you guys. All right. Thank you very much for joining us on site. Thank you very much for those who joined us through the live stream.